Welcome to This Explainer, Gearheads. Today, we're diving deep into something absolutely fascinating happening right now in the motorcycle world. We're looking at how the raw, completely untamed track legends of the 1970s and 80s are, well, practically haunting 2026 showrooms. I mean, manufacturers aren't just slapping vintage paint jobs on modern bikes anymore. No, they are dedicating entire production platforms to painstakingly recreating historical silhouettes. But the kicker? They're hiding cutting-edge tech, advanced frame geometries, and modern suspension just beneath the surface.
So let's jump right in, because we really have to ask the ultimate question up front. Can engineers actually preserve the mechanical soul of a classic track weapon while, strapping on modern six-axis IMUs, cornering ABS, and ride-by-wire throttles? Does a bike still have that visceral, old-school magic when it's loaded with digital safety nets? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out as we tear down the specs and styling of the 2026 modern retro lineup.
All right, Section 1, the Golden Racing Era returns. 1970s raw ethos versus 2026 precision.
To really get the 2026 market, you got to look at what they're trying to emulate. I mean, think about a 1972 Kawasaki Z1 or an 80s Honda Baldor. These things were a mechanical handful. They were uncompromising, raw mechanical beasts with heavy, manual cable throttles. They absolutely demanded respect. But their 2026 descendants, while they might look almost identical from 10 feet away, they hide some serious digital safety nets directly behind that nostalgic bodywork. You get the killer look of danger without the actual threat of, say, being thrown right over the handlebars if you grab way too much brake in a corner, or wrestling with a vintage tubular chassis that flexes heavily under pressure. Moving on to Section 2, Vintage Souls, Modern Hearts, Engineering the Evolution. We've honestly seen a massive, massive leap in motorcycle mechanics over the last 4 decades. We've moved entirely away from the air-cooled maintenance headaches, and let's be real, those sometimes erotic 2-stroke Grand Prix engines of the past, straight into the liquid-cooled 4-stroke reliability of 2026. Take a bike like the new Kawasaki Z900 RS. For 2026, they completely ditched the older choppy cable pull throttle for a buttery smooth ride-by-wire system. That single change? It's a total game changer. It allows for factory cruise control and way smoother cornering. The raw, heavy mechanical handling of the cast has been swapped out for sophisticated suspension systems and 6-axis IMUs. Those little computers calculate your lean angle hundreds of times a second just to keep you safe.
Which brings us to Section 3, Designing the Retro Illusion, the secrets of heritage styling.
You see, the real secret to this illusion is all in the silhouette. Designers are painstakingly matching historical tank curvatures and authentic retro color palettes to preserve that history, and they're getting incredibly clever about it. They're sneaking ultra-bright modern LEDs inside classic round headlamp housings, so the face of the bike remains totally vintage. They're even hiding modern radiator systems by molding faux cooling fins right onto modern liquid-cooled engine blocks. It gives you that beautiful air-cooled aesthetic, but without any of the overheating issues you'd get in heavy summer traffic. It is literally automotive sleight of hand at its finest, perfectly balancing that nostalgic bodywork with strict modern aerodynamic requirements. And when we talk about the Japanese manufacturers, they're heavily honoring the classic UJM template. That's the Universal Japanese Motorcycle. If you know, you know. This was the blueprint established back in the 1970s. Upright seating, a long flat saddle, and a transverse inline-4 engine. It was the exact template that completely revolutionized everyday performance. And honestly, it's the very geometry defining today's most popular modern retro bikes. All right, Section 4, Accessible Japanese Legends. The return of the inline-4. Bikes like the highly anticipated 2026 Honda CB1000F and the updated Kawasaki Z900 RS are absolute masters of this UJM revival. They deliver what us enthusiasts call sewing machine smoothness, but paired with massive, real-world power. The CB1000F is taking its cues directly from the Spencer-era superbikes, hiding a modern 1000cc powerhouse right under an 80s-styled rectangular tank. Meanwhile, the Kawasaki Z900 RS perfectly channels the iconic 72 Z1 with its gorgeous teardrop tank and ducktail rear cowl. They're all retro on top, but absolute apex carving weapons on the bottom, and they utilize stiff modern chassis that completely eliminate that terrifying high-speed vintage wobble. Now, the totally crucial point here is the surprisingly accessible pricing strategy. These high-performance Japanese inline-4s generally hit this incredible sweet spot right around the $12,000 mark. Think about that. You're getting reliable, everyday usability, well over 100 horsepower, and timeless style without entirely emptying your bank account. It is for sure an incredibly strong value proposition. Let's contrast that in Section 5, Premium European Nostalgia, the character of the twin. So, totally contrasting that Japanese inline four smoothness, the European market takes a wildly different approach. Here, you're stepping up to the $16,000 plus range. They lean heavily into premium heritage finishes and highly distinct, actually almost quirky engine characteristics. We're talking about premium hardware like the stunning BMW R1290 or Triumph's Bonneville T120 and their clip-on equipped speed twins. At this price point, you are absolutely paying for heritage badging, exquisite hand-finished detailing, and a very, very different kind of engine feel. The soul of these European bikes is just entirely visceral. As one enthusiast put it, the engine literally rocks side to side, and the power delivery is smooth but highly characterful. It's so true. When you fire up a Moto Guzzi View 7 or a BMW Boxer, you physically feel that sideways rock of the transverse twin engine right at a standstill. It's not trying to be smooth like a sewing machine, right? It's trying to remind you that you are literally sitting on top of a series of controlled explosions. It gives the chassis this undeniable mechanical soul that, well, spec sheet Warriors might completely miss, but true heritage riders absolutely crave.
Okay, Section 6, the 2026 Retro Rankings, from the showroom to the top step.
If we trace the timeline of our top 3 contenders, it's like a history lesson brought to life. We start way back with a 72 Kawasaki Z1, literally defining the concept of the superbike. Then, boom, we move into the 1980s with Honda's CB900F, bringing this raw, angular muscle to the streets. Just a few years later, in '88, Yamaha achieves absolute Grand Prix domination with the legendary YZR500. Now, jump to 2026, and these exact same lineages and those classic rivalries are clashing all over again right in the modern retro market. So, when the dust settles on the spec sheets and the styling, here's how the podium actually looks. While the CB1000F and the updated Z900RS are spectacular, incredibly capable UJM tributes, taking the third and second spots, the Yamaha XSR 900GP takes the absolute #1 spot for 2026, based on its sheer balance of value and authentic retro charm. Why? Well, because it fully commits to the bit. It is a breathtaking 1980s Wayne Rainey Grand Prix tribute. It hides a ferocious, modern 890cc inline triple engine and a super advanced Delta Box-style frame entirely beneath that nostalgic, boxy half-fairing and square rear seat cowl. It's such a massive upgrade from those flex-prone tubular steel frames of the 70s. It perfectly bridges the gap between looking like a vintage track legend and riding like a thoroughly modern canyon-carving weapon. So, with the golden era of racing completely reborn on the streets, but this time, with liquid-cooled hearts, lean-sensitive ABS, and ride-by-wire precision, the only real question left is this. When you look back at the glory days of the 70s and 80s, which track legend's ghost will you choose to tame in your own garage?